What if I told you that the Patriotic Front is not just choosing a new leader, it's tearing itself apart in a bitter fight that could destroy Lungu's legacy? Inside the party, two powerful names have clashed, given Lubinda and Mundubile. Factions are emerging, loyalties are shifting, and ethnicity has suddenly become a dangerous weapon. But here's the twist. This battle isn't only about who leads PF. It's about whether Edgar Lungu's influence will live on or be buried forever. Stay with us, because the hidden truth behind this succession war will shock you. The Patriotic Front is in turmoil. With Edgar Lungu out of the picture, the party is facing its toughest test yet, a succession war that has divided PF into bitter factions. In this documentary-style breakdown, we uncover how Lubinda and Mundubile's clash is tearing PF apart, the hidden role of ethnicity in Zambia's political future, why Edgar Lungu's legacy is at the center of this storm, what this means for HH and Zambia's fragile balance of power. This is more than politics. It's a battle for survival, legacy, and the future of Zambia. The throne left empty. Every empire begins with a leader, and every downfall begins with a throne left unguarded. For more than a decade, the Patriotic Front, Zambia's PF, was defined by one man, Edgar Lungu. His rule was absolute, his word final. Supporters called him Chagwa the Unifier. Critics painted him as the divider. But no one doubted that within the PF, there was only one center of gravity, Lungu himself. And then he was gone. When the 2021 elections stripped him of power, Lungu didn't just lose the presidency. He lost his iron grip on PF. The once mighty ruling party found itself leaderless, uncertain, vulnerable. And in that sudden vacuum, something dangerous happened. Ambition replaced loyalty. For the first time, PF members whispered openly about succession. Who would carry the torch? Who would inherit the machinery of a party still rich with networks, money, and grassroots support? At first, the question seemed simple. Surely Lungu would anoint a successor, a chosen heir to keep his dynasty alive. But weeks turned into months, and the silence grew louder. Lungu, whether by design or hesitation, offered no clear path. And in that silence, knives were drawn. Rival camps emerged almost overnight. Each claimed legitimacy. Each invoked Lungu's name. And each prepared for war, not against the ruling UPND, but against one another. This was no ordinary political contest. It was a battle for survival. Without a leader, PF risked splintering into factions. Without unity, it risked irrelevance. But for the contenders, that very weakness became opportunity. Supporters asked the question in hushed tones, if the throne is empty, who dares to sit on it? The answer would set the stage for betrayal, tribal divisions, and battles that stretched far beyond party headquarters. For Zambia, the story of PF's succession crisis is more than just party politics. It is the story of how power refuses to die quietly, and how fallen leaders' shadow can haunt a movement long after he's gone. The throne was empty, and everyone wanted the crown. Lubinda's hidden strategy: every succession battle needs a strategist, a figure who moves not with noise, but with calculation. In the Patriotic Front struggle, that figure was given Lubinda. To the public, Lubinda projected calm, authority, a man of intellect, a seasoned politician with decades of experience. His words were polished, his image carefully cultivated, the elder statesman who could hold PF together in its darkest hour. But behind that public mask, insiders tell of a far more intricate game. Lubinda knew the throne was empty. He also knew rushing for it could be fatal. Instead, he bided his time. He built alliances quietly, not through grand speeches, but through whispered promises in corridors and private homes. He courted both the grassroots and the elite, carefully balancing old loyalties with new favors. His strategy had two faces. The first was unity. He branded himself as the one who could restore dignity to PF, the healer who would rise above tribal divides. But the second was far more ruthless, a quiet consolidation of power. Party committees were slowly stacked with his loyalists. Key financiers were persuaded or pressured to pledge their support. Even critics admitted he was always 2 steps ahead, turning enemies into allies before they knew they'd been cornered. And yet, his path was not without shadows. Rivals whispered that Lubinda was too calculating, too polished, too detached from the raw emotions of PF's base. Some accused him of being Lungu's hidden choice, a puppet who would ensure the former president's influence lived on. Others went further, suggesting that Lubinda's strategy was less about saving PF and more about saving himself. But whether admired or feared, one truth was clear. Lubinda was playing a long game. He was not rushing to grab the crown. He was building the palace around it, ensuring that when the moment came, the throne would already belong to him. In a party torn apart by chaos, his calmness looked like leadership. But was it wisdom, or a mask for something more dangerous? Mundubile's counterattack, every strategist needs a rival. And in the Patriotic Front's battle for succession, Lubinda's calm maneuvering met its fiercest challenge in Brian Mundubile. Unlike Lubinda, Mundubile did not wait quietly in the shadows. He struck loudly, directly, positioning himself as the champion of the grassroots. To his supporters, he wasn't just another politician. He was the people's defender, the one who could protect PF's identity from being hijacked by elites. Mundubile's message was simple but powerful. PF was built on loyalty, sacrifice, and ordinary Zambians. If the party was to survive, it could not be handed over to career politicians and backroom strategists. It had to remain in the hands of those who bled for it. And with that message, he set himself against Lubinda's polished image. His counterattack was bold. He rallied youth wings, mobilized traditional leaders, and courted frustrated members who felt excluded from Lubinda's inner circle. At rallies, his words were sharp, sometimes bordering on reckless, but always electrifying. He cast himself as the underdog, the fighter unafraid to take on even Lungu's lingering influence. But ambition breeds enemies. Critics accused Mundubile of reckless populism, of playing the tribal card to consolidate his base. Others whispered that his defiance was not about principle, but survival, a desperate bid to stay relevant in a party sliding into chaos. Tensions between the two camps quickly escalated. Meetings descended into shouting matches. Rallies turned into battlegrounds of slogans and insults. And as the feud grew louder, PF's fragile unity began to crack. Yet Mundubile did not flinch. His defiance was deliberate. If Lubinda was the chess master, Mundubile was the warrior, charging into battle with raw energy and emotion. His supporters adored him for it. His rivals feared him for it. The clash was no longer just about who would lead PF. It was about two visions, one of calculated strategy, the other of fiery resistance. And in that collision, the party's future began to unravel. The ethnic card unveiled no political battle in Zambia is complete without whispers of ethnicity. And in the Patriotic Front succession war, those whispers became a roar. The fight between Lubinda and Mundubile was never just about leadership style. It became entangled in something far more dangerous, the weaponization of tribal identity. Lubinda, with his roots outside the Bemba stronghold, carried himself as a national figure. He positioned himself as the man who could rise above Zambia's ethnic divides. But his critics saw it differently. To some inside PF, he was too distant, too disconnected, a leader who could not command loyalty in regions where ethnicity still defined politics. Mundubile, on the other hand, leaned into his identity. With deep ties to the Bemba-speaking community, he painted himself as the authentic candidate, the one who understood the heartbeat of PF's core supporters. His rallies were infused with cultural pride, traditional dances, and coded language that spoke directly to identity politics. The result? A dangerous polarization. Party meetings that once revolved around strategy turned into debates over tribe. Was PF still a national party, or had it become a collection of ethnic factions vying for dominance? Analysts warned that PF was repeating history. Zambia had seen how tribal tensions could destabilize movements, fracture alliances, and weaken entire political systems. What began as a succession battle now risked igniting old divisions across the nation. But perhaps the darkest part of this chapter was the manipulation behind it. Some claimed ethnicity was not an organic issue at all, but a deliberate tool. A card played by power brokers to divide and weaken rivals. By framing the succession crisis as tribal, they ensured no single candidate could unify PF. And so, the throne remained empty. Not because no one wanted it, but because no one could claim it without tearing the party apart. The ethnic card was unveiled. And with it, PF's legacy as a national movement stood on the edge of collapse. Lungu's ghost in the room, every succession war has one unspoken question. What does the former leader really want? For the Patriotic Front, that question haunted every conversation, every meeting, every whispered deal. Even after leaving State House, Edgar Lungu was never truly gone. His silence spoke louder than speeches. His absence felt heavier than his presence. Publicly, Lungu claimed to have retired from politics. He appeared at church services, family events, even funerals, always projecting humility. But behind the curtain, party insiders insisted that his influence was everywhere. They called it the ghost in the room, the invisible hand guiding PF's future. Did he secretly back Lubinda, the polished statesman who many believe could preserve Lungu's legacy? Or did he quietly lean toward Mundubile, the fiery loyalist who embodied the grassroots energy that once propelled PF to power? The truth remained elusive. Some swore they had seen Lungu's close allies whispering strategy to Lubinda. Others claimed leaked documents showed support flowing toward Mundubile. But perhaps the most compelling theory was that Lungu wasn't choosing at all. He was playing both sides. By keeping the battle alive, by refusing to anoint a successor, Lungu ensured that no one in PF could ever escape his shadow. Every contender had to invoke his name. Every camp had to prove loyalty to him. And as long as his ghost hovered, the throne would never truly belong to anyone else. But this strategy carried risks. The longer Lungu delayed, the deeper the divisions grew. PF was bleeding members, losing ground, and tarnishing the very legacy he had hoped to protect. His silence, once seen as wisdom, was now interpreted as manipulation. For ordinary Zambians, one question lingered. Was Edgar Lungu truly gone, or was he still the hidden king, ruling from shadows? The ghost in the room could not be ignored, and its presence threatened to destroy the very party it once built. Money, power, and betrayal in politics, loyalty is never free. It comes with a price, and within the Patriotic Front, that price was measured in millions. As the battle between Lubinda and Mundubile deepened, whispers of money changing hands became louder than campaign speeches. Meetings were no longer about ideology or vision. They were about who could pay, who could fund, and who could buy silence. At the center of this web were businessmen, contractors, and hidden benefactors who had thrived under Edgar Lungu's presidency. Some had built empires on government contracts. Others had shielded fortunes in offshore accounts. Now, with PF in opposition and its survival uncertain, they placed their bets on the candidate most likely to restore their power. Lubinda was the choice of the elites, diplomatic, refined, and trusted to negotiate with international partners. But Mundubile drew support from the raw energy of grassroots members who believed he represented the real PF spirit. Both sides claimed loyalty, but in the shadows, betrayals unfolded. Party insiders leaked documents suggesting certain officials pledged allegiance to one camp, only to secretly finance the other. Some switched sides overnight, chasing promises of positions, contracts, or immunity from past investigations. Others pocketed money from both factions, playing double games with reckless confidence. The result was chaos. A party once united by power now stood fractured by greed. Meetings ended in shouting matches, branches split down the middle, and even longtime comrades accused each other of betrayal. But perhaps the darkest betrayal came from within. Rumors suggested that Lungu's closest allies were deliberately sowing confusion, ensuring neither Lubinda nor Mundubile could rise unchallenged. By keeping the playing field muddy, they protected their own wealth, their own influence, and their own secrets. To the ordinary PF supporter, the dream of a strong opposition had turned into a nightmare of selfishness. Money had replaced loyalty. Betrayal had replaced unity. And in the end, one question loomed. Could the Patriotic Front survive a civil war fueled not by ideology, but by the irresistible pull of money and power? The judge's dilemma. In every great political drama, there comes a moment when the battlefield shifts from rallies and whispers to the cold, silent halls of the courtroom. For the Patriotic Front, that moment had arrived. As the war between Lubinda and Mundubile escalated, the courts became the ultimate arena. Competing lawsuits were filed over who had the legitimate right to lead PF, who could convene party meetings, and even who could use the party's name. Suddenly, the future of Zambia's largest opposition movement was no longer in the streets. It was in the hands of a judge. But this was no ordinary case. Behind every legal argument, there loomed invisible pressure. Government officials, PF loyalists, foreign diplomats, and even church leaders were all watching. Each had a stake in the outcome. Each hoped the courts would tip the scales in their favor. For the judge, the dilemma was suffocating. Rule strictly by the law and risk angering powerful political forces. Bend under pressure and risk destroying the judiciary's credibility forever. Every ruling carried consequences not just for PF, but for Zambia's fragile democracy. Rumors swirled that backroom deals were being attempted, late-night phone calls, subtle warnings, and whispered promises. Could a judge truly remain impartial in a case where the fate of an entire political movement hung in the balance? Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Lawyers argued with passion, evidence was challenged, and witnesses contradicted each other. But beyond the legal drama, ordinary citizens wondered, was this really about justice, or simply another chapter in Zambia's endless power struggles? The judge sat in silence, pen in hand, aware that his decision would not just crown a winner, but could also condemn the loser, perhaps even end their political career forever. And so, as the gavel prepared to fall, the nation held its breath. Would justice prevail? Or would the scales of law tip under the weight of politics? The dilemma was clear. In Zambia, could a judge ever be truly free? The shocking verdict: every courtroom has a moment when time seems to stop, when the air feels heavier, when silence grows louder than words. For the Patriotic Front, that moment came as the judge prepared to read the ruling that would decide the party's fate. For weeks, Zambia had waited. Whispers filled the streets, radio shows buzzed with speculation, and social media turned into a battlefield of predictions. Would it be Lubinda, the seasoned politician backed by the old guard? Or Mundubile, the fiery loyalist who embodied the grassroots? Or would the judge throw the nation into further chaos by refusing to recognize either side? The tension was unbearable. In the gallery, PF members shifted nervously in their seats. Some clutched rosaries, others whispered prayers. Cameras flashed, pens scratched across notepads. The entire nation leaned in, and then the words were read. The ruling shocked everyone. It was not a clean victory for either camp. Instead, it exposed the party's deepest fractures. The judge declared that PF's internal elections and structures had been compromised, forcing the party to reorganize before any leader could be officially recognized. Gasps filled the courtroom. To some, it was a relief, a chance to reset. To others, it was betrayal, a decision that prolonged the chaos, weakened the opposition, and gave the ruling party more breathing space. Outside, emotions exploded. Supporters of both Lubinda and Mundubile claimed partial victory, twisting the verdict to fit their narratives. But deep down, they knew the truth: PF was not saved. It was suspended in uncertainty, torn between two leaders, and haunted by the ghost of Lungu. For ordinary Zambians, the verdict raised haunting questions. Was this justice, or political maneuvering disguised as law? Was PF being given a second chance, or was this the beginning of its final collapse? One thing was certain: the verdict did not end the battle. It only ensured that the war for PF's soul was far from over. The gavel had fallen, but the echoes would haunt Zambia for years to come.